Welcome back to another episode of Tin in the Kitchen. Today we are going to be cooking together a Filipino dish called Bistek Filipino, which is essentially a Filipino beef steak dish. This is my first time making this specific dish, and this is also my mother-in-law's recipe. To be quite honest, I thought that this was going to be a total flop, but I was able to make it work. This is a whole learning process. That's why I decided to start this whole Cook With Me series. I really wanted to learn the art of cooking, so we're going to learn together. For this recipe, you will need 1 package of beef chuck roast, 3/4 cup of low sodium soy sauce, 3.5 tablespoons of lemon, and lastly, 3 onions. A really important step with the meat is that you want to make sure the meat is still a bit frozen where you can cut through it. It will make it so much easier to cut through the chuck roast. So you basically want to cut against the grain, and you want to cut the meat as thin as possible. I actually made the mistake of making the meat a little bit too thick, so we had to actually cut it in half. You also want to take out any of the ligaments, which are the chewy parts, but you want to leave the fat because the fat is what's really going to make this dish really delicious. Now that we have thinly sliced the meat, we want to prepare our marinade. So for this, you're going to need 3/4 cup of low sodium soy sauce, as well as 3.5 tablespoons of lemon. This is where I also made the mistake because at first I used too little of the marinade where the meat soaked up everything. So I ended up having to make another batch, but while cooking, I realized that the marinade just really wasn't enough. So I'm giving you the correct amount of ingredients to use for the marinade. So here I placed all of the meat and the marinade together in a large Ziploc bag, and I basically want all of the marinade to soak into the meat. So I let this sit for about 4 to 5 hours in the fridge. It's best if you leave it overnight just so that the meat really soaks up all of the sauce. So for this recipe, we're going to be using 3 onions. It's really just your personal preference, but I love a lot of onions. And you want the onions to basically be in O's, in a circle. Heat the pan to medium-high heat. I added about 3 tablespoons of oil to the hot pan. Take our meat from earlier, and when you're grabbing the meat, just try to shake off any of the excess marinade. Put it into the pan. So you want to let the meat brown on each side for about 3 minutes. It's been about 3 minutes. Now we're going to flip over each of the meat. We're going to put this on a plate and set it aside. Now we're going to add our second batch of meat. So you want to set the remainder of the marinade to the side for use later. We're going to just let our meat cook on each side for 3 minutes. So our meat has now browned on both sides, so now we can take this out. Once we've set aside the meat, now we're going to go ahead and add our onions. We're also going to be cooking the onions over medium-high heat. We want our onions to still be a bit crunchy, so we're just going to stir fry them for a few minutes. I also tried to separate as much of the onions from each other so they're all each individual onion O's. So you want to set aside the onions because now we're going to add the rest of our marinade. We're going to simmer the rest of the marinade into the saucepan. At this point, I realized I just didn't have enough marinade sauce, but I was still hopeful, so I let it simmer for a few minutes. So once it's already done simmering, you can add the meat back into the pan. Now you want to cover this and let it cook for about 5 minutes. If it's drying out like this is, you can add just a bit of water. So it's been cooking for about 10 minutes, so we can now add back in our onions. And then we can turn off the heat. Now we are ready to plate and serve. We plated our Bistek Filipino. Now we get to enjoy it. In all honesty, I thought this dish was going to be a total flop, but to my surprise, it was very delicious. The meat was tender, the onions were crunchy, and it had that beef stick flavor. The only thing it was lacking was more sauce. This is a learning experience, and at least next time when I cook this dish, I know exactly what to do. So I hope this video inspires you to get in the kitchen, start cooking, and I hope it also inspires you to maybe give this dish a try. If you do, please send me a picture through my social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm going to leave all of the links down below. Thank you so much to my mother-in-law for sharing her beef stick recipe. It was absolutely delicious. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Tin in the Kitchen. If you did, please make sure you smash that like button, as well as don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell notification, turn on those post notifications to be notified of new videos. If you missed last week's episode, I'm going to leave a playlist right over here on the screen. Thank you, Chickies, so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for a brand new video.